Hello, everybody. Welcome to Medicine and Science on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Palavito. I'll be your moderator for today's show. And of course, today's show, we're going to examine the top 5 scams that we're seeing in basically in social media revolving around, purportedly, it looks like medical advice. So with that, we're going to introduce our speaker for today who's going to go decipher these things. We'll bring in Dr. Michael Patmos. Dr. Michael Patmos, welcome to your show on Medicine and Science.
Good morning. Am I coming through loud and clear?
You're coming through great.
Wonderful.
Floor is yours.
Thank you to Nick and to your audience for giving me the privilege to spend some time with you today. You know, this issue of medical scams or healthcare scams has been a favorite of mine since I was in medical school 50 years ago. And I've always been interested in this. And it has never failed to amaze me, the creativity and the seemingly endless variety of medical frauds and scams that are out there. It's pretty clear there's no defense against this. I mean, some of the FDA has some authority and there are some laws against medical fraud, but it's such an overwhelming thing that no one could possibly catch everybody. So the consumer, if there was ever a caveat emptor situation, this is it. Consumer, you are on your own, buyer beware. There's all sorts of fraudulent things for sale out there. If your viewers are interested in this, just Google search healthcare fraud or medical scams, and up will come some very good websites. The FDA has some good information on this, and as do other agencies. So there's a lot. In fact, I put a couple of links on my LinkedIn profile today on this very subject. But there are certain characteristics of these medical scams that they all share. And, they rely on testimonial evidence, which is invalid. They make outrageously broad claims. They're advertised in the lay press, and they offer money back guarantees. And they have this sort of like overly simplified, explanation. The one thing will cure all cancer, that kind of thing. Cancer's 100 different diseases. So one thing is not going to cure all cancer. But, when you ask the question, so what are my top 5 medical scams? Well, that's a subjective list right there. I don't know of any way to measure the largest scams or the ones that cost the most money or cost the most lives or affect the most people. So I'll pick my top 5, and then the other guests can discuss their top 5. So my number 1 top medical scam of the day is the anti-vax movement. Why? Because the World Health Organization has declared the anti-vax movement to be one of the top 10 threats to global public health, along with famine, war, drought, etc. The anti-vax movement is among the top 10 threats to global public health, responsible for about 1.5 million deaths annually due to under-immunization, mostly in third world children of color. That's the truth. That's the anti-vax. So they get my number 1 award. Number 2 is the spike protein detox treatment being offered by some of the dubious doctors out there. Their argument is that the vaccine, which contains the RNA for the spike protein, that the spike protein makes people sick. Now, the problem with that is that if you're really afraid of the spike protein, the virus has a lot more of it than the vaccine does. So the virus should be the way to get spike poisoning. The third one, my favorite one, is the ivermectin hydroxychloroquine. This was really promulgated by Donald Trump. Initially got a lot of he got a lot of media exposure over this when he was president, but ivermectin has failed miserably in every well-done study. It just doesn't work for COVID. There's no mechanism of action by which it would work. And when it was put to the test in good studies, it hasn't worked. Now, the doctors who are proponents of ivermectin are citing poorly done studies that have been largely retracted or don't meet high quality research standards. Are published in open access, pay to publish, not real medical journals. But then there's a few more that aren't COVID related that I would say represent the biggest medical scams. And one that I have been passionate about for 50 years is alternative medicine. Now, within that broad umbrella term, alternative medicine is a lot of good stuff. No one should be opposed to healthy diet and eating, natural foods as opposed to living on processed foods. Who would argue that you're not better off eating a healthy salad and some fruit versus a Whopper? So within the alternative medicine umbrella, there's good content. They argue for a healthy diet and healthy lifestyle, keeping your weight down and so forth. That's great. But also within alternative medicine, weaved within the fabric of alternative medicine are these threads of ridiculousness, all kinds of things, and usually having to do with herbs and supplements and vitamins and everything from going back 50 years ago to when Laetrile was an alternative treatment for cancer to nowadays they're pushing, having bicarbonate. You got to change your pH. You can't change your pH. It's just, you can't do it. You'll die trying. So the pH is very highly regulated. So within the alternative medicine world, there's all sorts of silliness. Homeopathy, for example, true homeopathy is on its face nonsensical. It's based upon the principle of like cures like, or that's called the law of similars. The belief in homeopathy is that a substance that causes a symptom is the cure for that symptom. You just have to give it in highly diluted doses. So they dilute it down to where there's nothing left, and then that supposedly cures that symptom. So homeopathy is from the 1600s, 1700s. It's a nonsensical thing, but it's part of alternative medicine. And then a current one that's really hot right now is anti-aging. Everybody wants to live as long and healthy as possible. And it is true that healthy lifestyle, eating right, exercise, you will live longer. But most of the lifespan is genetically determined. No matter what you do, the human lifespan has a finite limit. Until you can turn off our DNA and the telomeres in our chromosomes that are responsible for aging, nothing will deny Mother Nature and Father Time. They're going to have their effect no matter what you do. I am 72. I live very healthy lifestyle. I'm active. I exercise, and I have some good genetics, but I'm not going to be around in another 50 years. I can assure you that. So we can do a lot to try to live longer and live healthier, but there's no really anti-aging magic bullet. That goes all the way back to the search for the fountain of youth, which has never been found, but people have been searching for the fountain of youth now for centuries. I believe it was Ponce de Leon who proposed that the fountain of youth was in Florida somewhere. Maybe that's why a lot of elderly people move there. I don't know. But in any case, those are my top 5 scams: the anti-vax movement, the spike detox, ivermectin, alternative medicine in general, and the anti-aging phenomenon. And everybody wants a magic bullet to not grow old. Well, I don't think there is one.
Wait. My wife just went and bought this magazine. Did you see this? Anti-aging recipes. And it shows blueberries. I should be eating more blueberries.
Blueberries are good for you. There's nothing. That's a kernel of truth. Yes, blueberries are good for you. Okay. Strawberries are good for you.
So I'll live to be 101. Then can I live to be 101 if I eat blueberries?
You might live a month longer if you eat more blueberries and fewer Big Macs.
I was afraid you were going to say that. Yeah, Rick Rosner has joined us.
Some people have immortal cells. There's a woman named Henrietta Lacks that she had cells that live forever, that are still used today, like 80 years after she died. The trouble is that the cells that you have that are immortal are cancer cells.
Oh, great.
The deal, like some of this stuff you can try to take, like astragalus is this, or stuff that's supposed to extend your telomeres. There's a reason that your telomeres get shorter, because if you some of the stuff that will extend your cells' reproductive cycles and will also kill you via cancer. Because
that's really good to know. Now, what about though the life expectancy? Like I'm going over to Spain, and I'm getting a digital nomad visa so I can bebop between here and Europe. And so the first thing I do is I look at the medical deals they have over there. Actually, my wife said, gotta look at what they have. Health insurance is really expensive over there. It's $150 a month. Unbelievable for somebody my age, which 67. I'm going, wow, My wife is 75. It's 150 a month for her too. So I'm going, boy, that's expensive. Then I looked at life expectancy. Average life expectancy in Spain, 84. The U.S., 77. What accounts for stuff like that, Dr. Patmos? How come the Spanish are living longer and we're dying over here and we're purportedly have the best health in the world? What's the story?
That's a very big question. There's a lot of not everybody in the United States has access to healthcare. Not everybody in the United States has access to good healthcare, and so it's very disparate. We know there are racial and ethnic disparities in healthcare. Certain ethnic groups have a much worse outcome because in the United States, our healthcare is not evenly administered. The quality of healthcare you get very much depends upon your socioeconomic status and your demographics, and so folks who are not as fortunate as others have more health problems, and that drags down our overall life expectancy. I'm sure Rick has some comments about this.
Yeah, so under COVID, our life expectancy went backwards for the first time in decades. So you got COVID, especially in red states where people are skeptical of the whole treatment and so it's just a cold. It's not just a cold. COVID has killed more Americans than Americans who've died in battle in all of our wars combined. It's the deadliest event in U.S. history. Then you got 100,000 opioid deaths a year. Then you have 72% of U.S. adults being overweight or obese, which metabolic syndrome is the whole thing you start getting when just like you're putting too much stress on your body from being huge. Then you have despair and suicide. So
you're absolutely right, Rick. And working in hospitals and having been a chief medical officer in hospitals, or even recently, you certainly see that. You see folks who come into the ERs who haven't had the benefit of medical care, untreated diabetes, untreated infections. We see this all the time among poor people who just don't have any insurance or good insurance. If you have Medicaid, you have something, but try to find a doctor who takes Medicaid. It's really hard. So we have very uneven system in the United States. And I think that compromises us. And our lifestyle in the United States, a lot of people don't have a healthy lifestyle. We do have a lot of obesity, and we have a lot of unhealthy high-risk behaviors in the United States. So that compromises things. But having said that, lifespan is genetically determined for the most part. I mean, why does a fruit fly live for 14 days and a bristlecone pine tree live for 15,000 years? And why does a turtle, the green turtles, which I'm going to go dive with shortly, they live to be over 200. But humans, the lifespan has now you can modify it a little bit based upon risk factors and health and whatnot, but it's basically genetically determined. The human lifespan is determined by our genetics, and it is what it is. We live a lot longer than as long as a bristlecone pine tree.
How can you figure these gene pool out? So my problem is I had one grandmother live to 101. My other grandmother lived to 99. One uncle lived to 94. Another uncle lived to 94. But then my dad died at 72, and my other uncle died at 72 also. So as I look at it, I'm going, the data is inconclusive. I mean, except you're better off to be born a female in my family than you could live to age 100. But if you're born a male like me, I could be 72. I could be 94. How do you determine this?
Some of that is random stuff too. I mean, the reality is, in geologic time, the difference between living to be 101 or 91, it really is irrelevant. To the person, yes, 10 more years of life is 10 more years of life, but these are really small differences, somewhat genetic. The overall reality is the human lifespan, as we know it now, is pretty well limited. I think 100, the theoretical maximum might be 110 or 115 years.
Nobody makes it past 120. Anytime people do, but it's because the courthouse burnt down with their records and they forgot or are lying about when they were born.
I would agree with you. That's the only one people live past 120. But let's look at this as an industry, anti-aging as an industry. Okay, forget the science because we know people don't believe in science, but they believe in the industry. Don't you see, as we have baby boomers turning 10,000 per day, turn age 65, that as the boomers move up there, they're going to be naturally attracted to anti-aging recipes or anti-aging scams. I mean, aren't we going to see more and more out there that hey, if you take this certain pill or whatever it is, you can live longer? Are we going to see more?
I'm a textbook boomer. We're in 1952, and as a doctor, I can tell you, boomers you can spot a boomer a mile away. They refuse to get old. Boomers want every hip replacement, knee replacement. They want anything that will keep them back at Woodstock. We want to stay in 1969. We don't want to go into the future. We don't want to get old. I'm guilty of that myself. I mean, I fight every day to keep the old man out. And that's kind of a peculiarity to the boomer generation. We refuse to get old. And the problem is Mother Nature and Father Time don't care what we think. We're going to get old anyway.
We're optimistic. Society, since there's more of us than anybody else, is catered to us.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Gen X's, they've been beaten down. Like they've seen that we own everything, the boomers, and so they have lower expectations.
All I know is as long as Mick Jagger is still out there performing, I have hope.
Mick Jagger's dad was a PE teacher. Mick Jagger, like for all, he's supposed to be dissolute and full of drugs. No, he's really he's always taken care of himself.
Yeah.
Wow. So I guess it wasn't alcohol and drugs.
So I have a phrase that makes me crazy when I see it on like TV pills, like Balance of Nature. And there's one that's called Man. I don't know. I forget the name of it. It's man tested. It's supposed to, it's kind of a fake boner pill. But when they say clinically tested, that doesn't mean anything. All it means is
somebody in a clinic tried it.
Pill to some people, and then they kept track of, who was taking. They don't say what the results are. They just said they gave the pill to some people.
People have to remember their history. Back in the 1970s, there was a substance called amygdalin marketed under the brand name Laetrile. And it was very popular. It was all over the country, and it was marketed as the cure for cancer. And this amygdalin is derived from peach pits. And this was being sold by quacks all over all over the world, actually. And a lot of people rejected appropriate treatment, effective treatment for cancer in favor of taking Laetrile. And eventually Laetrile was exposed as a fraud. It fell out of favor. In fact, I was involved in exposing Laetrile back 50 years ago when I was a medical student. There was a case of a child with Hodgkin's disease whose parents refused treatment in favor of Laetrile. The child died, and those parents were actually tried and convicted of child endangerment, though they were never sentenced to any hard time because they obviously lost their daughter. But I was involved in that case as an expert nearly half a century ago, and that was really the beginning of my interest in a lot of these medical scams. But there's no one's out there to protect us. Consumers, you have to protect yourselves. Learn the telltale signs of a fake treatment.
Yeah, you couldn't even get Laetrile in the U.S. after a while, so people would go to these clinics in Mexico where they inevitably die because it was like a last ditch, Hail Mary. Yep. You might have known my aunt, who was a lecturer on cancer fraud, Helene Brown, 50 years ago but anyway.
Well, I'll have to take
let's talk about the anti-vax movement, 1.5 million deaths. We talk about a lot of people. The anti-vaxxers are saying, well, there wasn't really 1.5 million. What would happen is somebody would have cancer, they'd have COVID-19, and then they would be coded for COVID-19. Is there any truth to that, or are they just barking?
No, that's so. First of all, in this context, the 1.5 million deaths was referenced by the World Health Organization. This is due to under-immunization globally, and those 1.5 million deaths due to under-immunization globally are primarily weighted toward third world countries. Okay. We did have about 1.1 to 1.2 million deaths in the United States from COVID, and about 300,000 to 400,000 of those could have been prevented had those people been vaccinated. They refused vaccination, they declined vaccination, and died as a result. And as far as the issue of, they didn't really have COVID, they died with COVID as opposed to of COVID, that's ridiculousness. There is a standard process by which doctors fill out death certificates. We're trained in how to do it. And if you have COVID and you die, you died with COVID. And if you died with COVID, you died of COVID. So, it's a contributing factor to your death. It counts.
Right. Okay. All right.
And
What is this?
what people say, well, it mostly killed 80% of the people killed in the US by COVID were seniors. So they're like, yeah, they would have died anyway. No,
We don't matter.
actuarially, if you do the math, somebody
Right.
did the math, and everybody on average, even if you were a senior, you could have expected to live another 10 years had you not gotten COVID.
It is true that COVID disproportionately killed older people and chronically ill people, but almost half of the people who died of COVID were not seniors. And
Right.
there's well over 1,000, I forget the exact number now, but we're well over 1,000 children in the United States who died of COVID, healthy children who died of COVID. So COVID didn't just kill elderly people. And you know what? Don't elderly people matter?
Right. It shouldn't be a death sentence like they said, well, they were fat or they were old or they had the blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, you shouldn't be sentenced to death just because you're chunky or because you're 68 years old. That's just a cruel, it's cruel BS.
Yeah, it's a complete lack of concern for humanity, which is what you see the anti-vaxxers, you know, they say they position themselves that they're concerned about people. Actually, what they're doing is that most of them are aligned in a political effort, and the anti-vax strategy has political value. There's one of the parties is rallying around this, and they're using this medical freedom anti-vax stand as a way to manipulate voters. So this has great value to manipulating the low information voter. You know, stand up for your rights. Don't let anybody force a vaccine on you. And, yeah, that sounds good to me. That's what's going on, and that's what they're doing. They don't really care about whether your child dies of measles. What they want to do is get far right-wing politicians elected, and those right-wing politicians have figured out that anti-vaxxery is good political strategy for them.
Also because Trump, according to rumor, would refuse to wear a mask because it would mess up the orange stuff he puts on his face to look tan.
Well, I don't think we'll have to worry about him too much longer. In about 8 weeks, he's going to be a convicted felon.
Let's talk about the spike protein detox treatment. What the heck is that? I've never heard of it.
So that's really brilliant. You know,
Right.
I won't mention the name of the doctor who came up with it because there's a couple doctors, but they're famous disinformation doctors, fake doctors, you know, underqualified and so forth. And they said, well, you know, the vaccine gives you the RNA for the spike protein. The spike protein makes you sick. And if the spike protein is the reason why people have all these side effects. And so we have to be detoxed from the spike protein. And they come up with this whole regimen of herbs and vitamins and supplements that you need to take to cleanse yourself of the spike protein. They just forgot one key element. The virus has the spike protein. It's covered. Each SARS-CoV-2 virus particle is covered with spike protein. So if you really are afraid of spike protein, don't get COVID because you're going to get a lot more.
But don't they have to go through clinical trials or have evidence that shows this works? I mean,
No,
how can
actually,
they just
when
go
it
out and
comes to
say, hey,
herbs,
it works.
herbs and supplements are not treated the same by the FDA. They don't have to go through the same protocol. So if you want to market a drug, you have to go through the FDA and the approval process. But Nick, you could go today and take the
I was
grass.
thinking about that.
Literally, you could take the grass clippings from your backyard, put them in a capsule, and sell them as Nick's secret to being a successful chess player. Just take one of these grass capsules.
Can we quickly talk about what the spike proteins, like when you look at an artist's drawing of a COVID thing, it looks like it's covered with little doorknobs.
Yes.
So the doorknobs are the things that if they touch a cell, they stick to the cell, and then the virus injects its genetic material into the cell.
It's like a key fitting in a lock.
Right.
The spike is like the key, opens the lock, opens the cell.
So, and then your immune system, when you take the vax, it makes a bunch of these doorknob things, which are essentially harmless, to train your immune system when it sees a doorknob to go attack, you know, the doorknobs.
Right.
And yeah, if you get the vax, it tells your body to make a ton of doorknobs. The doorknobs aren't infectious. They just train your body to look out for them.
Right.
And the deal, I looked up some numbers, and I couldn't find that many numbers, but yeah, if you're worried about the frickin' doorknobs, the spike proteins, by getting COVID, you're going to get 80 to 8,000 times as many doorknobs
Right.
in your system.
There's a lot more spike protein in COVID than there is in the vaccine. So these people who are selling spike vaccine detox treatments, they ought to sell them to the COVID patients. But then the problem is that then they would come under FDA scrutiny, because that's actually a real disease. Long vax is not a real disease. So they're selling a fake treatment for a disease that doesn't exist.
Okay, let's talk about ivermectin, because the anti-vaxxer said, well, the FDA approved it now again for human use, hence we won. Did they win because it got approved again? What happened there? What is the spin on this one?
Okay, so the truth on that one was that lawsuit was brought by an ENT doctor in Texas and some others who weren't also on the suit. And they basically sued the FDA because the FDA ran an ad that said, "You're not a horse, don't take this medicine." And the reality is the medicine is useful in humans for certain conditions. So whoever released that ad at the FDA made a mistake. Ivermectin has a role in humans, and so does hydroxychloroquine, just not for COVID. So what the lawsuit said, that the FDA had to retract that ad and could no longer tell doctors that they couldn't prescribe something off label, because a lot of things are prescribed off label. But it was not a victory. It didn't indicate that ivermectin worked. It just was the FDA got its hand slapped, or they voluntarily agreed to a settlement to withdraw that ad, because the ad was in effect incorrect. Ivermectin is used for certain parasites in humans, and hydroxychloroquine is used in certain disorders, including lupus and other autoimmune disorders. I've prescribed both of these drugs for the correct things. The reality is they don't work for COVID. That is a fact.
I see. Okay.
I have two miracle treatments that will stop 300, all but one person in 400 from dying from COVID. One is cigarettes, and the other is chocolate sauce. Because that's how many people are dying right now. One person in 500 who gets COVID will die from COVID at this point in time. So because the mortality is fairly low now, though it's still a lot higher than flu, like if you do a study and you give 40 people cigarettes or chocolate sauce or ivermectin, likely nobody will die. And then you can go, woo, I found a new thing, which is what you see in a lot of these bullshitty, drug claims. There are dozens and dozens of drugs that appear to be effective against COVID just because of statistics.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So we have to protect ourselves. Consumers need to be educated, and I think sharing the telltale signs of what health fraud medical scams look like. They have classic signs. You can spot them once you know what those signs are.
Yeah. Last one before we adjourn is alternative medicine. Since the placebo effect is a real thing, can't alternative medicine work because even though it doesn't work, we have the placebo effect, hence it does work? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, within alternative medicine, there are some legitimate things. There are some natural remedies that are effective and that do help. And certainly to the extent that alternative medicine promotes a healthy lifestyle, that's a good thing. But within alternative medicine, there are also a lot of bogus remedies. And it's something that I don't think there's any way we're going to stop this. People have to just be educated and learn to recognize when something is bad science and when it's legitimate.
Yeah, I think I missed that in my medical and science class in high school. Oh, wait a minute. They don't offer that in high school or middle school.
There's a huge placebo effect in hair growth drugs for some reason. Maybe because you're paying more attention to your hair. 3 months after you start taking just about anything that's supposed to be good for your hair, you'll have a little more hair. And then after another 3 months, you'll be like, nah, I guess I really don't.
Well, when I was 21 years old and I had a receding hairline, my father got me a bottle of Hinoki oil, special oil from Japan. All it did was give me a shiny head.
Yeah. I found what has helped me is I've quit washing my hair. I just let it stick. Like if you wash your hair every day, you're washing hair off your head. I just leave it and it kind of sticks all together.
You're funny.
Well, with that, we're going to leave everybody thinking about things on medical and science, and we'll see you next week on Medical Science on the Pod TV network, wherever you view us, which is LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Roku. Remember, it's not the Roku channel. We have our own channel. You go to Roku, type up the search engine, our channel will show up along with the Roku channel, which is a different channel, Netflix, etc. But just realize we're not in the Roku channel. We have our own channel. I keep telling people that, so they'll watch us on that. But anyway, we'll see you next week on Medicine Science. Take care. Bye bye.